Hello, friends. It's Carla, your online doctor, with today's Live in 5. Today is Thursday, May 7th. It is 5 p.m. It is a beautiful day here in South Florida. For those of you who have been following my journey here with my father, he was readmitted to the hospital on Monday. I didn't post anything because it was just emotionally draining. Anyway, he was admitted Monday, and thank goodness he was discharged today. Actually just arrived back at rehab within the hour, and I'm very hopeful that this was a tune-up and he is out of the hospital for good and will stay in rehab for a little while till he can go home. Anyway, we were talking the other day about oxygen saturation. We talked about it for a couple of days, and somebody mentioned something which I replied to. They talked about, what about these patients being treated, that COVID-19 patients being treated with BiPAP or Cpap or some other types of measures before getting intubated. And I replied, which is what I've been told by my colleagues, that the reason why they're intubating, besides the obvious, besides the fact that their numbers indicate that they need to be intubated, is because intubation is a closed system. When you intubate somebody and put them on mechanical ventilation, there's no coughing or anything that happens where aerosolized particles can be spread. Unlike being put on a Cpap or BiPAP or just a nasal cannula, face mask, all of those allow for the virus to possibly get into the air and spread. Now, I'm not saying that the healthcare providers are intubating simply based on that. I'd like to think that that would be not a good reason, but again, I'm not there to say. I'm just going to go under the assumption that that's not why they're doing it. But it made me think, and it made me do some research, and I found some articles which kind of made me open my eyes. And the article I'm referring to is one where they talk about the mortality of people on ventilators. And you've probably heard this on the news, that there's an increased mortality of people who get intubated because of COVID-19. And the numbers are staggering. They're like 75 to 90% of people who end up on a ventilator are going to die if they have COVID-19. And when I first heard that information, I said, well, like, duh, if somebody is that sick to require intubation, clearly you can't say that it's not the intubation and the mechanical ventilation that's killing them. It's the fact that they're sick enough to require that measure that is requiring, so if they're sick enough to require intubation, you're dealing with a different category of patient than somebody who doesn't need to be intubated. If somebody can stay home, their chance of mortality is much lower than somebody who ends up in the hospital on a ventilator. Okay, I hope that makes sense. But could they have survived without intubation? And that's what got me thinking with the Cpap idea. And this article I read talked about a very small study. I mean, I don't know if it was 10 or 20 patients, but they did not intubate patients, not because they didn't need it, but they were seeing if these patients could do better with just other oxygen measures. High flow nasal cannula, high flow face mask, Cpap, BiPAP, whatever the mechanism was, but anything shy of being intubated. And what was interesting was that these people, their mortality rate was about 10% compared to those that required that were intubated, and again in other facilities. So it makes you wonder, what parameters were they using? What numbers were they looking at to say, okay, we're going to hold off on intubating them? Okay, because if we're willing as a medical society to accept oxygen saturations less than 90%, maybe with respiratory rates over 30, and say, let's see how these people do. And I'm not talking about the sickest people who could suffer a heart attack or other things if you don't, but maybe the younger people or people who don't have coexisting diseases. If we would um, not jump the gun and intubate them simply based on numbers. So if we're willing to accept an oxygen saturation of 85% on these measures, on this high flow oxygen, would they in turn do better simply because we did not proceed to intubate them and put them on mechanical ventilation? Now, understanding that intubating somebody in and of itself is not benign. Okay, there is something called barotrauma, which can happen. There is the risk of all kinds of tracheal problems. You have to put people on sedation to keep them tolerating the endotracheal tube. You have to turn them because they say that patients do better when they're on their stomach. So that requires a whole group of people to turn them safely to make sure that all their body parts are padded. You don't end up with injuries because of positioning. You have to feed them either through a tube or through intravenous measures. So it's not just let's throw them on the ventilator. Okay, there's all kinds of other things that can happen negatively by being on a ventilator. So this is, it definitely takes this to another level. And I'm hoping to see more studies that talk about this. I even read one where they're talking about hyperbaric oxygen therapy, where you can put certain people who can tolerate it into hyperbaric chambers and increase their oxygen level simply by increasing the atmospheric pressure. Or doing what we call ECMO, where you actually take the blood out of the body, almost like what they do on cardiac, when somebody's having cardiac surgery, open heart surgery, they put them on bypass. That type of a mechanism where your blood is going into a machine and putting oxygen into the blood and then putting it back into the patient, kind of bypassing the lungs, letting the lungs heal, if you will. So lots of things to think about. I'm going to keep my eyes open for more information on that because it did make me think, what if these people could be held off from being intubated and maybe their prognosis would be improved? So, no answers yet. Obviously, this is kind of things happening in progress, but like I said, I will keep you posted. If you have any questions about that, if I'm not making myself clear, put it in the comments. I kind of was flying off the cuff today. No, these are my notes. Very simple today. No written out information because it was more of a makes you think. So hope you guys are having a great day. I had a really good talk for today, but we'll do that one tomorrow. So have fun, enjoy your family. Hopefully we're getting towards the end of this, whatever this is, and get back to new normal pretty soon. And I will see you guys again tomorrow for another Live in 5.